Okay, welcome back to Quirky Builds. This is my latest Quirky build. It is a doorknob. Yes, a doorknob, a really, really heavy duty doorknob. And it really works. Door open, door closed. Door open, door closed. This was a lot of fun, and it turned out almost exactly the way I wanted to, which I've said before is kind of rare. Usually my projects turn here and there. This was inspired by my son, who sent me a text of some funky gate that he saw at a buddy's house or somewhere where he was working. He's an electrician. And this gate was made up of gears and sprockets and chains. And I thought, right away, oh, wouldn't that be cool if that actually opened the door? And yes, it would be cool. Originally, I wanted it to stretch the whole span of the door, but it would just be too heavy. This thing's already probably 75 pounds, and if I spanned the whole thing, it would have been hundreds of pounds, and I would have had to get heavier duty hinges or maybe have a wheel that the door rides on, or both. And I didn't want to get that far into it. This was almost like a practice thing, but turned out so cool. This is the real thing now. So here's how I did it. There's a place near my house, within 10 miles, in Jordan, Minnesota. It's called Sport Wheels. It's a motorcycle salvage company, and they have, I think, 7,000 plus bikes in various stages of completeness, and it's really a cool place. So when I thought of this project right away, I thought, ooh, a great place to get the gears and sprockets would be Sports Wheels. So that's where I headed to, and sure enough, they had hundreds and hundreds of sprockets and gears and chains. The trick was to get the right thickness. There's different chains that have different spacing, so it took a little sifting to make sure I had a long enough chain and all the gears that were similar sized. But they definitely had what I needed. And when I got back, the first thing they did is I wire brushed them. That was probably the least fun of the whole project. I wire brushed the outsides and used a Dremel on the inside, little circles and crevices and crannies. Once they were all clean, I kind of laid them out and to see how they all fit on that plate, the backing plate. Those big sprockets needed a filler so I could get the shaft in there. That's the little bearing I used. I wish I would have used a bigger one. That's kind of the one downfall of this project. That bearing and shaft should have been bigger. That bearing is made out of cast aluminum, so it needed a back plate so that I could weld onto the backing, and then I would screw that bearing onto that back plate. And that's their chain. It took a little while to figure out how it was going to go, and need a little space in that upper corner for the handle so you don't rack your knuckles on. So I played around with that a little bit until I thought I had her good. And these are the back plates for the bearings. I needed to drill a couple holes in there to mount the bearing onto. And after I drilled them, I used a tap and die set to thread them. And so then I could just use regular standard, I don't know what I use, 1/4" screws or bolts. And then but the bolts were long, so what I had to do is to shave them off relatively flush. So I stuck a recip in a clamped it to the table and used that to cut them off. And it didn't cut them perfect, but then the grinder, it just took a second for the grinder. It was ingenious, yes. So then welding those plates, the bearings were attached, and I just welded the plates, touched them. The thing is, when you're welding on relatively thin, it's weldable steel, but you got to be careful you just do a spot here and then a spot there and let it cool, otherwise you warp the heck out of that backing. I know you're not supposed to spray a weld with water. The welders are going to hate me for this, but I wanted to keep those bearings cool, so I was really spraying on the bearings to keep those cool. I probably should have left them off before I welded them on, but they were already on, so I was too lazy and I didn't. That's kind of how the shaft works. On the bigger ones, that filler, I welded the filler on, and then I attached a shaft, drilled a hole in that filler, and then welded the shaft onto that. The smaller gears needed a filler in the center too, but I was able to just use a large nut for those and weld that on and weld the shaft onto the nut. One of the tricky parts was getting the shaft that turns the actual knob inside, because the guts are all inside the door that are the same. So there's that little U-shaped shaft I needed to attach somehow. So the shaft that fits into this guy right here is welded to this, that funky little piece right there. I pulled this off the old doorknob and welded it on there, and that's how it works. I needed a way to keep the handle in a horizontal position, because when you pull the handle up, the latch opens, but also when the handle goes down, the latch will open. So the latch needed some way to, or the handle needed some way to keep, in the same position. So I created this little retaining slide for the handle, and it actually serves a dual purpose. It prevents people from pulling on the handle and putting a lot of torque on that smaller bearing on that last gear. To secure the handle on the backside, because there's no other side to this which that screws into, I just cut out a circle from the sheet metal that I had, a little extra piece, and screwed that on to the door, and then screwed this onto that piece, and that other little half round deal that I was talking about, that fits over that, and it turns, but it only turns one way. It can only go up, but it goes the way that feels most natural. And that's it. There's my heavy duty doorknob. It took me about 30 hours and it cost about 120 bucks, I think. 50s for the gears and the rest of the bearings. This thing's not cheap, but it was a heck of a lot of fun. And yeah, on to the next one. Stay tuned for more quirky builds.